So this is the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's in the public domain. I think it's a really good map. And if you uh, if you have the video later, you can make it full screen and do a screenshot of this map, or you could just go find the map. I really like this map. I think it's pretty accurate. So here's Paul crisscrossing the Mediterranean world, but it ends at Rome, as you can see. Let's focus on the red line right here, the fourth journey of Paul. I like to call them trips. Something about missionary journeys just sounds like, I don't know. Paul's not that kind of guy. He takes trips. He travels. The traveling Paul. And the cruise that I just came back, I called it the Seafaring Paul. Okay, so he's been in Caesarea, remember, for 2 years under Roman custody, and two procurators and King Agrippa and his sister Bernice all say, let the guy go. He's done nothing. These crazy Jews are always fighting about terms, and he said this and she said that, and our scriptures say this. Who could deal with such people with all of these fights and ideas? Let him go. And Paul says, no, I don't want to go. I want to go see Caesar. I want to appear before Caesar. I would like to think that's historical. I think it's cool as hell. Just think about it. I could see him wanting to actually get in front of the emperor and say, could I just have 5 minutes to tell you my story? You know, or 10 minutes. I don't know how it worked to come before the emperor, but my guess is there's this whole docket of cases that he's got to see and probably has assistants handling most of it. And if it's like many judges in large urban areas today, a lot of those things are just dismissed. And lately I've been thinking, as I've told some of you, I'll cover this more in the Paul course. I have a whole thing on what happened to Paul at the end. Like, did he really die at Rome? But I'm starting to think for sure that he did not die when he got to Rome. He was under very loose guard, according to the book of Acts, kind of house arrest. And he got to have friends come and go, and he carried on his work until for 2 years. And then Acts just stops and doesn't tell you what happened. But our earliest source is First Clement. And if you look at First Clement, we usually date it to 96 CE. If you count Peter as a bishop of Rome, which I don't, but let's say you do, I think he's the third official pope or bishop of Rome from a Roman Catholic viewpoint, or just a Catholic viewpoint universally. Eastern would recognize this as well. But he's the bishop of Rome, not of the whole church. He's not the pope in that sense to the Eastern church. So what does he say? He says Paul did appear or come to Rome, but then he was released and he went to the farthest points west. And what I want to do today, as I talk about Paul, is pull in Bart Ehrman's conference and a couple of the speakers and a couple of the special sessions we had, because I know many of you attended that. And if you didn't attend it, I would urge you to buy it. You will have the 10 lectures from these experts. And at the end of the lecture, I'll tell you my link for getting that. But anyway, back to the map. So he leaves Caesarea, he goes on up to Sidon and catches a ship. He's under guard with the centurion. Now they're traveling, we know the dates from, if we trust Acts, we know the dates, meaning the time of year. It's the winter, and you're not supposed to travel during this period right here. They go south of Crete, they get blown sort of south of Crete. And they land at Fair Havens, nice name for it, and they're able to make it out. But right here, I think it's at Conitus near Rhodes, they catch a grain ship for Rome. And we know from our sources that Nero had given a special bounty because there's a real grain shortage in Rome in the winter, that any ship coming from Alexandria and making it up to Rome with grain is going to get a double bounty. So he's paying ship captains independently, like contractors, to go ahead and risk the winter, because if you make it, you're a good sailor, you figure it out. Maybe you can get to harbor here or here, as he did finally at Malta after being shipwrecked, according to the book of Acts. Then when you land with that grain, you're gonna make double or triple, I don't remember, but we have sources on this. So they caught one of those ships, those scary ships. Now we already know that he's been in Jerusalem for Pentecost, and then he talks about the fast being passed. That's Yom Kippur. So it's if this year the festivals are very late, they're in October, but they range from September to October. So I don't know the year exactly that he sailed, because some people say 58, 59, 60. But whenever it was, it's late September, like right now, into early October, probably. And you should not be taking a ship from the mainland here down to Crete and heading. This is the scary part right here. And then you've got to go through these straits. Okay. So on our cruise, the Biblical Archaeology Society cruise, we didn't take this exact route, but we did go up. We did go to from Cyprus, not in this order, but we hit Cyprus and we hit Rhodes and we came up to Ephesus and we did Athens and Corinth and we did go to Crete and so forth. And we finally were at Rome and at Naples, the port, and so forth. So here are all the things that we did. Again, you'll have these slides. I'm going to upload this to the Patreon group, the Mark course, and the Dead Sea Scroll course. It'll be part of your course pack, so you'll own this. So this is what we did. Naples and Pompeii, 2 lectures. Here are the lectures. So when you're at sea, I would give 2 lectures. I'm going to repeat these on YouTube in the future, like in October. So even if you weren't on the cruise, you'll get to hear the lectures. I'll just repeat them sitting here at this desk. Won't be the same as looking out at the window at the ocean while I'm talking, but and then Athens and Corinth. Santorini is not a Paul thing, but wow, that is the Bronze Age Pompeii. That's when the Tira volcano erupted, and it's a set of Greek islands, and one of it's called Santorini, where you land, and you're inside the volcano, and the islands are little parts of the volcano sticking up over the water. And this was around 1500 BCE. Some say 16. Many think it is connected, or the exodus from Egypt is connected to this disaster. There's lots of other theories about that. But if you know Sunka Jacobovici and James Cameron made this film called The Exodus Decoded. I do recommend it, by the way, even though many Hebrew Bible, ancient Near Eastern people panned it. Rhodes I love for Rhodes, but as far as a Paul stop, Cyprus, 2 more lectures. Ephesus, oh, unbelievable. Mykonos, I stayed on the ship, but my wife and daughter said I was really stupid to miss it because it was fabulous, but I had to have a day to catch up on things. And then Crete, and finally 2 more lectures, and then back to Rome. So that's what we did. So what I want to do today is just give you what I learned new and some of the feelings I had on this cruise, because I had been to most of the places before, some of them several times over the years. So here I am at the port of Naples, and Pompei is to the south in Herculaneum, but this is where Paul landed. This is the harbor where Paul landed. And this picture was not taken on the cruise because we were in the harbor, but I didn't walk down alone and have somebody take this. I had a group of 40 people with me, so I couldn't do things like that. So this is an older picture, but my wife took it, and I'm looking, away from Italy, and I'm actually looking west. I'm thinking, I've got to get to Spain. I've got to get to Spain to finish the work God has given me. Not me, but you understand. But what I like about this breakwater and just the port is, it's changed, of course. It's a modern deep sea port with ships coming in, although the big ships actually land north of this where we did. But the amazing thing about it to me was picturing, I'm trying to imagine Paul landing at Naples, at the port. and then making his way over land up to Rome, and just the feelings he would have. He's under guard, but it seems to be a loose and friendly guard. Remember the procurators who kept at Caesarea for 2 years, they were treating him. He wasn't in some dungeon. When you go to Caesarea, they show you Paul's dungeon, which is this underground sewer looking thing that they recently discovered that had some chains on it. I guarantee you Paul wasn't there. That wasn't what was happening. The procurators were interested in talking to him, Felix and Festus, and even maybe getting some money from him because he's head of a movement and he's a Roman citizen and so forth. So this picture is symbolic, but for me, very powerful. I like looking at this picture. I like thinking about what I was feeling. Now, when you get out on the high seas of the Mediterranean, this is one of the rough patches when you are going from Asia Minor and getting down and trying to get over from Crete through and up where he got shipwrecked. So I took this one day when we were finally getting waves that were 4 feet, 8 feet in the ship. And I was lecturing that day because we were at sea. And it really was a fabulous experience. But I mean, our ship is completely solid. Obviously, it's a big, huge cruise ship with 4,000 people on it, and I had 40 of my group. But I looked out so many times at the ocean. I would sit in a chair on our balcony and just think Paul, think Paul, think 40 years you've been studying this guy. This is where he travels. See, I'd never done that. I'd flown to these places and visited them, but something about the cruise, I'm telling you, it changes you. It really does. The feel of it. So the Seafaring Paul. So our first stop was Pompei. This is a artist conception that I got from Simca. His film Pompei, which many of you've seen on my Patreon group. I was able to offer it free to people with Simca's permission. It's a fabulous film. And Simca argues that this is a very significant event in August of 79. It's the last year of Vespasian, the emperor. They've already celebrated the conquering of Jerusalem. The Arch of Titus is built. The Colosseum is built by Nero with Jewish money and Jewish slaves and bounty. And here's this unbelievable city. Roman cities are so extraordinarily beautiful. They had poor areas, but they almost had a kind of a middle class, and you could start businesses and come up with, you could have a little shop. You could actually be a baker or have a food stand on the main street. This is the main forum, and you can stand. It's a grassy and paved area today. And I think the next shot, I took it from right here looking at the mountain. And this is just showing you the terror. Think of like 5,000 jet engines suddenly going full blast to the stratosphere. And it's the ash that began to settle that morning where you just begin to feel, what is this? Oh, what's happening? And that's all captured in that film that Simca made. It's just incredible to watch. So yeah, that's taken from that same spot. And there are those pillars that you saw in the drawing right there. So there is Vesuvius. This part has collapsed down because of the eruption in 79. But Simca argued that for Christians, this was the beginning of the end because they're expecting, think of the Pauline group, and I think other Christians as well. I'm using Christian just to mean followers of the movement, of all stripes. They're expecting the appearance of Jesus in the clouds of heaven. I pull my Bible out here and read you something that I read in the film that came to me at Pompeii. This is one of those flash ideas where I'm filming with Simca. I'm a big part of the film. And I added this at the very end of the film. I said, I woke up the third day of filming and I said, Simca, I couldn't wait to talk to him. I said, I think I have an idea. I think the Pompeii eruption is mentioned in the book of Revelation. He goes, what? I said, yeah. I said, but I don't want to tell you. I want to do it on camera so it'll be new to you. I don't want to tell you now. And then you go like, well, James, you got some ideas, and he'll already know. I wanted to catch him in the camera going, what? Okay. So it is Revelation chapter 18. And it's written, it's a poetic section. If you have a modern translation, it'll be put in meter. So it's not the prose of Revelation, it's a piece that has been put in. As some of you know, I believe even in I consider maybe even a pre-Christian version, but I think this is a part that was part of the later. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Fallen, fallen, double fall. Ancient Babylon fell. Now modern Babylon is falling. Modern Babylon is Rome. The haunt of every foul spirit, the dwelling place of demons, the haunt of every foul and hateful bird. All nations have drunk the wine of her impure passion. The kings of the earth have committed fornication. The merchants of the earth have grown rich. And then God has remembered her sins and so forth and paid her back double. But that part I've always known and read. But as you go on, alas, alas, great city, in 1 hour your judgment has come. That's where I begin to think, wait, this is pretty sudden. The merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. The port of Naples is just to the north. You can see it. I mean, if you were up on Vesuvius, you could see the port. It's close. It's all like suburbs of Naples. And then it mentions their cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, all kinds of scented wood, articles of ivory. And what do we do when we go through Pompeii and see the display, and especially in the museum? These very things. An opulence that you wouldn't believe. And I haven't read it all. Costly wood, bronze, iron, marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, that is, human souls. So a lot of slave trade. And then it goes on to say the merchants who gain wealth from her will stand afar off, weeping and mourning. And then it talks about the ships out in the bay. Can you imagine the ships seeing this volcano go up? And the idea was that this is just going to erupt and destroy all of Rome. Rome will go down in one day. And it was truly terrifying. Year 79. And we have accounts, and you can read it yourself, but I'm wondering whether that was written after Vesuvius erupted, maybe in the reign of Domitian. And many thought that Nero would be the final evil ruler. Remember that final evil ruler stuff from Daniel 11, Mark 13? Paul mentions it in 2 Thessalonians. The evil ruler that's going to sit in the temple of God and claim he's God and so forth. But Jesus is going to destroy him in flaming fire, taking vengeance, right? So this opulence is mixed with the sexual immorality and a sinfulness and slavery and all kinds of really, I mean, people go today and ooh and ah at the beauty of the buildings and so forth. And I certainly understand that. It's so stunning. The high life of the Pompeians and the Herculaneums, people who live there. But look at the level of preservation. If you've never seen slides like this, look at the level of preservation. How could you walk through an ancient city from 79 CE and have an intact? This isn't reconstructed. This is what they found under the ash. You can go in the doorway. You can see the paintings on the walls. This is a very wealthy house that I'm passing here that the baker owned, the famous baker. He's in the film. And he converts to faith in Jesus as the Messiah. He becomes a Jewish convert. I'm not Jewish, but a convert to this Jewish sect. I love this soup shops. This is just one of the many shops along the main road. And then what is that? Oh my goodness. I think most of us can figure that out. It's on the road. That's on the pavement. You walk on that. It's pointing the way to the brothel, basically, people call it. Okay, pointing the way for male visitors or males who live there. As you're going along, you can look up on the walls. Straight ahead, you'll have the House of Prostitution. Please notice the chevron. I'm not saying this is the Talpiot tomb. It isn't, but the Talpiot tomb is imitating this design with the 3 points here, 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 and the circle in the middle. But it's a penis and testicles. So you're leading up to the House of Prostitution. This is one of the wall paintings. This would be a mild one. I didn't want to show you the others. You can look them up easily. But here's a reconstruction of what it might have looked like. Just kind of walking down the street. You got your dogs and your cats, and imagine the market. This is that main street. The prostitution house is just here to the right. If you're coming down, you turn right here and you follow the penis signs right to here, and you can go inside. And they're different rooms. You rent a little room with a bed. It's a stone bed, cushions on it, and you pick the male or female that you want and pay the price. Now, we think these women are Jewish captives from 70, and this is 79. So it's just chilling to think about, especially pious Jewish women that even cover themselves in the view of men are now forced into this kind of slavery. And it's hard to even imagine. In the film that Simca made on Pompei, we mainly studied the graffiti that you can't study anymore. It's been lost. Sometimes it's preserved, and we try to uncover. And then you have lots of skeletal remains in one of the ashy areas, and people were incinerated, but mainly just covered with ash and suffocated, not necessarily burnt. And they had to get higher and higher, as you could imagine, and leave the city. Pliny the Younger, that we know from later serving Trajan, his uncle, Pliny the Elder, he actually was caught on the shore, and Pliny the Younger was on a boat. So that description of the boats looking at the harbor and seeing all of this and thinking, the world is ending. This is the first judgment of God. Jesus Christ is going to appear in the clouds anytime, right? Paul's people are thinking. And the end is going to come. So, and just so you know that there's still a custom. So I didn't buy one of these. It looks like it's bottle openers. So it didn't seem like it belonged in our kitchen. So I didn't buy one, but pretty bizarre. So that was a start in terms of getting a grasp on Roman culture. So I used my imagination a lot. It was very hot and very crowded. Not good to visit Pompeii, even in early September. You need to wait till after the 15th. Then Athens, you see the stadium, the famous Acropolis, but modern Athens is just kind of crowded it out, but you still get the little outcropping of bedrock. And my interest there is up at the top are these stones here, because these stones are original to the time of Plato and Socrates and Zeno and Aristotle and all of the Greek people that I've studied for years now. And here's a close-up, and notice they're set on the bedrock. Bedrock doesn't change. And many of you know how I am about places. If you've been with me on a tour or you heard me talk about this, the thing when I go to the Acropolis, and I couldn't do much of it, even though our group split and got to go and see what they wanted once we gave them some basic instructions. So we had about an hour. But I'm going to sit on this stone right here. Your feet touch the floor, and take my shoes off and put my bare feet on these stones. And I'm going to say, wow, put my hand on the bench, on the step. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, what is Stoa? The porch, and whether he taught right at the Acropolis or not. But how many times did Socrates pass this? How many times did Plato, Diogenes, all the Lucian, all the people that we study? I just find it to be an amazing place, not to mention the history of this incredible thing. But great is Athena, right? Athena, the great goddess watching over the city of Athens. And then symbolically, we think of Athens and Jerusalem, the two currents of civilization that go into our own world. And if you add Christianity, then world Christianity and the Enlightenment and the modern scientific age, with the two great creations of what I would say, what are the two great discoveries of our time? Digital coding, zeros and ones. We discovered zeros and ones. And that's why we're watching this right now, because a bunch of zeros and ones and DNA. So you think of the epochs of history and you go back to Athens and Jerusalem. So here I've spent 45 years of my life, basically, even 50 years, because I started as a teenager, thinking about Athens and Jerusalem. What are the currents, the cross currents of the Mediterranean world? And then Mars Hill. The steps here are wooden and metal, but they're over the bedrock steps so they don't get worn more. And this is where Paul preaches in Acts 17, according to the book of Acts. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then Corinth, Temple of Athena on the top again, the Acropolis. We didn't go up there. This I took in 1979. That's all there was. Now I get to go back. I had not been back since 79. This pavement is from the first century, and Paul, according to Acts, stayed here a year and a half, and I've studied that letter of Corinthians, or that Corinthian correspondence, over and over. In the course, I devote 3 entire lessons just to getting through that Corinthian correspondence. You get Paul, you get the heartbeat of Paul. And so when I walk this street, when I imagine these shops on the side and where he's living and where he's staying, I'm just so moved by it, in the same way that I feel about that Naples harbor. This is the seat of Roman government. This is where the governor Gallio would sit. There would be a chair and a tent up here and a kind of a table where he could pronounce judgment. And Paul, the defendant, would stand below, probably where we were told at this side right here he would stand. I had always thought maybe it was right in front, but maybe not. They're doing more research. Anyway, overall, it looked completely different from that picture I just showed you. Lots more excavations. Now you got to have the imagination. This is not Ephesus. This is not Pompeii. You can see it's just piles of stones. I think I like Corinth the most. Like, okay, we saw a bunch of rocks. Tabor really got off on that. He was just standing there stroking them practically. Yeah, I was. I'm standing there in front of this bema and I'm thinking, Paul stood right here on this pavement, and it's just knocking me out. And if you know this story, it's such an amazing story. So what does Gallio say? Look, you Jews, you're always fighting about things. If you have a matter of law or justice or like something that needs adjudicated, come to the court, but don't waste my time. And what does Paul say, literally, in his First Corinthian letter? Quit taking people for lawsuits. Have you ever connected that to Acts? Like, he's been drugged before Gallio, and now he says, you guys don't need to go to Roman courts to solve these problems you're having, because they're all fighting and all divided. Remember, he opens the letter. I can't believe the divisions that are among you here. So to me, when I go to Corinth, I'm thinking of all this. And I want some of you to go back with me, because I'm going to go again. That's what's left of the Temple of Apollo. And there's a close-up of the bema. And this is where Paul would have stood, we were told, right? This is newly excavated, and they put up the marble facade to show you. It wouldn't look like that. See this marble? This would all be covered with marble. So they've reconstructed some of this. But here, the foundation, see, that's intact. This is reconstructed. Up on top, they put some of the things that they believe did belong on top. And it's called a bema, judgment seat. There's one in Jerusalem where Jesus was tried by Pontius Pilate. You can actually stand on it today. It's recently been discovered in the last 20 years. Very few people know about it. Some of you have been on my tour. We spend considerable time there, and it's usually the highlight of the trip for people because you can stand on the Gabbatha pavement that Jesus stood on, and there's no question. I've said to Shimon Gibson over and over because he was there when it was discovered with Magen Broshi. He was a young boy, teenager, and he was there. And I said, is this, you know how I do 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 from like, doubtful, we don't know, maybe all the way to like, this is it. I like 1 to 3 because it's easier. And Jesus stood on that Gabbatha pavement outside the Western Wall, not the so-called Western Kotel, the Western City Wall. The Bema is now exposed. Jerusalemites don't even know what it is. They have concerts that rock bands get up on the Bema where Pontius Pilate, because it's up high, and they play music to crowds in the grass below. I don't really care. I think it's kind of interesting. But can you imagine going around the crowd and saying, "Did you know Jesus stood up right there and he was crucified later that morning?" That's all in my book, The Jesus Dynasty. Now, this I hadn't seen. This is new. They'd found it in the ruins and they had it in the museum. The Corinth Museum is small, but it's just incredible because it's all the things found at Corinth. And I think you recognize these and notice how the style differs. It seems to be celebrating not necessarily the temple, but diaspora Judaism, where every synagogue would also have a menorah. We see it at the Beit Alpha synagogue, the Sephirist synagogue, other synagogue floors throughout the Holy Land that have been discovered still intact from the 3rd and 4th century. And so here you have different ways that you could make the menorah. I think in our house we have 4 menorahs right now. And then this I'd seen pictures of, but had never really seen before. And they have it right up on the wall now. And it used to say, it's broken right here, but it says Synagogue of the HEB, Hebrews, Synagogue of the Hebrews. That's incredible to me. That was over the door, right, as you walked into the synagogue where Paul taught. So Paul goes to the synagogue. He gets in trouble after 3 weeks. I think what happens is at first he's accepted, he's a rabbi, and they want to hear him, greetings. Yes, I was in Jerusalem and I was raised in Jerusalem. Have you heard of Rabbi Gamaliel? I studied with him. I know him. Wow, speak to us, Paul. Give us some wisdom. So he gets to speak as a guest. And we have that inscription in Jerusalem, that Theodotus inscription that kind of tells, there's usually a guest house for visitors, probably stayed there. That only lasts 3 weeks because when he gets to the point, and it happened also in Athens at Mars Hill, when you get to the point that there's a sky man, I need to tell you about this sky man, and he's up there in heaven, and he's waiting, he's going to come back, and the judgment's coming, and he's the Messiah, descendant of David, Isaiah 11, and judgment's going to come on the world. And they go, well, that's just like apocalyptic belief. Yeah, we have some people in the synagogue that believe that crazy stuff. And then Paul says, no, this is Jesus of Nazareth. And he died 20 years ago. He's crucified by the Romans, but God raised him to the heavens and glorified him. And we now follow him. And God the Father, always, the one God, and the Lord Jesus Christ. And I've come to tell you, you need to submit to the Lord Jesus Christ. And you need to have your sins washed away through his blood. And so I don't know if he'd say that part in the synagogue, but he would gradually get it out. And they had scriptures to prove that he would go over. I get all of that out of that sign. And then Asclepius, the great healer, there's Asclepiums or Asclepius temples all over the Greek world. He's so popular. And here's one of the reliefs where he's healing a woman, puts his hands on her, probably of a fever or some kind of illness. Notice the similarity to Jesus, not talking about the nudity. I wouldn't know much about that, but the face, that's Jesus. This I took in 79, and I was waiting to see this to show the group. And it's much nicer a display now. but I still like this one because you can see it all. What you would do at the Asclepius temple is you would go into the temple, sleep in front of the statue of the god. I think the priest probably gave you a potion to drink because you would sleep then and have visions of the god coming, and he would either heal you or not heal you. Like, here's somebody with a missing finger, a diseased hand. You can see breasts, but they're not made from the body part, but you could buy a, a, an image of what your ailment was, and they cover the whole body. Here are some of the different diseases people had: lower limbs, groin, and so forth. So the museum has a lot. You can see it's arranged nicer with labeling and so forth. So that's Corinth. And then Ephesus. Wow, I was so glad to see Ephesus. Turkey has made this into the most fabulous archaeological site. It's so impressive what they've done. Here's the main street. You always want to uncover the main street, one of the main streets. This is the theater here. I'll show you another picture. But if you dug right here, you would have significant ruins all the way up the hill with unbelievable treasures just waiting right there from first century Ephesus. According to Acts, Paul spent, it's Acts chapter 19, he spent 2 years here and maybe more if you keep reading, and then said he stayed even longer. Okay. So I got the same walking the street feeling, but also that Paul he's writing the Corinthian letter from here. So once again, I'm using my crazy romanticized imagination. And then that stadium. Here's the library. World famous, one of the 3 great libraries of the ancient world. They've reconstructed parts of it. There's a big debate that was reflected. Our guide mentioned it. She said, we used to think these were breasts. She's the many-breasted god, and now we know they're male testicles, Artemis and so forth, and Diana of the Ephesians and Aphrodite, all of these female fertility figures that merge into one. And they essentially are fruitfulness. So they're blessing the trees and all the plants and the seasons and the harvests and so forth. And the latest view is that these are queen bees. They're the queen bees. You can see bees here. If you zoom in, you find bees all over the statue if you start looking. And it stands for just fruition of the earth, and the queen bee being the one to symbolize that. Because for the beehive, she's bringing life to everything else, right? She fertilizes things, she keeps it all going. And everything the colony does is to advance as a group. So humanity would be serving her, the goddess. In Egypt, she's called Isis. Here's that theater. Paul did not speak at this theater, but he almost got mobbed, if you remember. And one thing I often point out to students, when it refers to the wild mob that wants to kill Paul because he's hurting the business at the temple, whether that's true or not, it's in the book of Acts 19. Little silver images you would buy. The sales are going down because Paul's having great success. It sounds like it's probably exaggerated. This is such a huge city, I don't know. But it wouldn't mean that he didn't cause some disturbances. But this would be the city, the assembly, and it's called in Greek the church. It's actually called the ecclesia. So what it says is the Roman calmed down the church, meaning the mob, yelling for Paul's death. And he was able to get free. You can read it in Acts 19. Now, here's what I hadn't seen. We love Pompeii. Everybody wants to go to Pompeii. Well, you might as well go to Ephesus. You're going to see even more. This is better preserved than Pompeii. Not because of a volcano, just because of the slopes. Ephesus is down at the bottom of a valley, and all those houses going up, soil washed down and covered those. So this is up high. You have to walk up all these steps. And they've just excavated one little area like that embankment. And look at the opulence. It's unbelievable. These are private homes that people own. Look at this. Marble pillars, fountains, all the walls have frescoes. Don't think that it looked like that. It looked like all of the walls would be covered with beautiful paintings and so forth. I put this in at the end just to say that Talpiot tomb times 1,000. Greco-Roman tombs like to have this decoration. There's all forms of it. Sometimes it has three peaks, a circle inside. Sometimes there's not a circle inside. And I think it shows that the Talpiot tomb that some of you are interested in, if you've read my book, The Jesus Discovery, many, Simca included, the filmmaker, is convinced that this was something very significant that makes the Talpiot tomb special. I agree it does, but what it shows is that it was provided by a very wealthy person who wanted to provide a really nice tomb for the Jesus family. It looks like it wasn't finished, or maybe because it was exposed to the elements in the earthquake of 363, that it's all worn down. To finally you get kind of just the stub of the outline of what it was. But I happen to see these in the museum. And here I am gazing again, but this time I'm gazing out, headed for Rome, and I'm thinking of Paul's shipwreck in Malta, and I'm thinking of the dock. There's the dock and the sea. So if you want to go with me next year, we've changed the date. It's not the same ship. It's a smaller ship. I think it has 1,000 people instead of 4,000. Why do people go on cruises? From what I could tell, to eat, to drink, to gamble, and to visit a few sites. There are these people that, like, I kept meeting people, having a drink at one of the many bars. It's like a city, a floating city. And I'd say, oh, is this your first cruise? Or my first cruise, I've made 45 cruises. I go on cruises 2 or 3 a year. That's what I do. And all these cruisers are out. And they go, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm leading a tour on Paul. I only have 40 people. So, so we're going to do it again, but it's a tighter itinerary. 2 weeks is too long, folks. It's too long. So if you go to jamestabor.com/Tabor Med Cruise 2025, you can get all the info. I'm going to try to get them to cap it at about 30. It's just better to have a smaller group.